and with some of the governor's staff. And the way this is designed to work is that the RLC will take our recommendation, which included the number of restrictions to permit gaming to open back up in the state, and they will discuss it. I don't know if they will ask me to help them understand how we came about that recommendation, what the basis was. I attempted to articulate all that on a cover letter that I sent with the recommendation. Mute your microphones, ladies and gentlemen, please. So they should take that. They may hear from me. I don't know. I haven't been invited yet, but that's okay. They ultimately will make a recommendation to the governor. And of course, the governor can take their recommendation in whole. He can take part of it. He can change it. He can modify it. The bottom line on how all of this is going to work is that the governor, in consultation with his staff and his cabinet members and public health officials, will decide under what conditions and when gaming can commence operations again in the state. I'm hopeful that it will be sooner rather than later, but I think all of you know that we've been challenged in the state. We're going to move conservatively. I know that phase one casinos are not specifically mentioned as businesses that were contemplated for reopening. They could be reopened under phase two. What I have suggested is perhaps if the governor doesn't see fit to open casinos in phase one, perhaps we could have a phase 1.5, somewhere between phase one and phase two. I think we've offered a good plan for reopening. I think it can be, if it's subject to the conditions that we have recommended, I believe it will be a safe place for employees and for customers. So we're still waiting on that feedback. As soon as a decision is made, I obviously will share it with all of you, but we want to work through a few issues this morning. I do want to tell you, I also forwarded you this morning an email from Marlene Patrick Cooper, who's affiliated with Unite Here. That is a labor organization that represents gaming employees, not only in Louisiana, but Mississippi and other jurisdictions. And I have worked with them in the past and will continue to work with them. They're a good group. They represent their constituency well. And every discussion that we've had, we've talked about the importance of protecting your employees. We're committed to doing that. I think we were committed to doing that in crafting the recommendations and the restrictions that we did. They sent a document that you can see later today at your leisure. I think we hit probably on 90% of what they recommended. We're all in the same place. We all want a safe working environment. We all want a safe gaming space for customers who feel like they're ready to come back and be in the public space again. So we thank them for sharing that with us. I'm sure they're on the conference today, and we welcome their continued input as we move forward. So let's get into the meat of the agenda and talk about customer temperature checks. Since we rolled out the restrictions last week, I've gotten some feedback. I've heard from some of the property owners, and I'm going to let Dan Reel, my co-chair, pick up here. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a great segue from what you just had been mentioning, and we're talking about the safety is the utmost importance, but also through conversations over the past week when we have put the cover letter out, this has been also the most popular topic that has been a part of the conversations that I've been having with my constituents or colleagues, if you will. And what I wanted to do was put it out there as an understanding that if we were in a position to do customer screening at all entrances for customers, that we would be able to pull that off, and we would be able to do so regardless of the timing given to us laid out by the governor, and do it right and do it well. Some of those have been also called into question, the mechanisms with which we would be using this type of device, whether it's a thermostat or whether it's a thermal camera, whatever it may be. What I wanted to throw out today was A, to get your comfort level, and B, to get your comments on such screening at every entrance point that you have at your facility. So why don't we start, maybe Wade, I don't know if you've had conversations with others about this topic? And I know typically the chairman goes to you first. I think it's a good way to go maybe on this topic as well.
We have had conversations with many operators. The issue is, again, equipment availability, and what methodology would be employed that's least intrusive for the customer to encourage their participation in it. So, you know, we agreed to that element being included in the recommendation, and I think we still stand by that. It's just a question of really equipment availability.
Okay, thank you. How about like Vincent or Stan or the others who represent different parts of the business?
This is Stan. I would conversation try to channel the screening through our main. But we have the same issue. A lot of operators are hesitant to order equipment. You know, it's mandatory. We have it.
Okay, Vincent, I see you on there. Do you have a thought on the topic?
Actually, I think I missed most of your opening comments. You were kind of cutting in and out, and in the chairman, it's actually kind of behaving kind of strange today. So I missed some of your opening comments. But I think regarding the temperature checks, we certainly have concerns about getting equipment, and certainly the equipment that's least intrusive to the customer, where they just kind of walk through it or do some of that, where it isn't simply somebody with a handheld thermometer. You know, the availability of that is probably weeks or months away in some cases. So I think that is our overarching concern.
I clearly don't want to limit it to those I called on. Does anybody else have a thought?
Before, there's someone who hasn't muted their audio. Please mute your audio. We're getting a lot of feedback. We're getting a lot of feedback. Let's try that. All right, who are we going to? Dan, I'm sorry.
I opened it up after Vincent and see if anybody else had any comments.
Baron?
No, El Dorado mirrors, Wade's stance too. I think that availability of equipment, type of equipment, we've been vetting that for the past 30 to 45 days already in anticipation if this became a necessity. The one thing too that I think we all think through is the litigious nature of the environment we work in. We need to be prepared for that. So if there's anything that could help shelter us from that, where we screen somebody, they're above whatever limit we set that at, and then it becomes a matter of turning them away. Litigiously, we need to think about that in the future if we can get some protection from things like that. So equipment-wise is the concern. I think we've vetted through that. We feel comfortable we have the ability to do that. And then it's just setting up the processes and the locations at our facilities.
Thanks, Baron. Does anybody else have a comment on this topic? It is a pretty important topic, so I would love to make sure that we heard from everybody before we move on.
Okay.
This is very regular. We at Penn we have the thermometers on order, and we feel fairly confident that we will have the thermometers in place in the next couple of weeks and can perform the temping operations that we've committed to. Like everyone else, we have the concern about how the process will go. Each person will accept it differently, and we have to be sensitive to how that is going to go over with our public.
I completely agree, Barry. It's definitely a topic for all of us to consider. There will be customers who will be very upset. So what we have written in ours, just to share, is that you give them a 10-minute sort of, not a timeout, but an opportunity to cool down and then retry as they re-enter the building. And that will require a little bit more staff. I'm not sure if everyone is going to want to follow that procedure, or if you're just going to say, if you're over 100 degrees or 100.4 degrees, you just simply can't come into the facility, and you could try again later. But we're going to try to work with the patrons as much as we possibly can and make sure we still preserve the safety of the building.
Thanks, Dan.
This is Roseanne Thompson,
Go
and
ahead,
at the
Roseanne.
Golden Nugget, we are prepared to do a secondary check as well. But we were looking at 15 minutes, not 10.
Mr. Chairman, is this one of those examples where as long as the bar is set, there will be properties that will use their opportunity to do their own thing, if you will, and make sure that they at least achieve the minimum?
Yeah, yes, I think that's, you know, what we have said is whatever restrictions we have recommended and what is ultimately approved and forwarded to the governor, what the governor adopts, you can be more restrictive than that. If they made it optional for customers, you could still require as a property temperature checks. But let me say this. When I spoke with Dr. Levis last week before we finalized our conditions for reopening, he said that was a very important part of the plan. That is temperature checks, not only of employees, but customers coming onto the gaming floor. It's a different environment than other commercial environments. And I've heard your arguments that when you go to Home Depot, they're not taking your temperature. But I don't regulate Home Depot. We regulate gaming, and it's a state licensed operation and business and industry.
No, it's okay.
This is my sense. If I were an operator, I would prepare to find some the equipment necessary for customer checks, because my sense is that it's likely going to be mandatory in whatever plan the governor recommends that customer temperatures be taken before they're permitted onto the gaming floor. I don't know that with certainty, but I think you should plan that direction. What I would add to that is it doesn't have to be $20,000 thermal cameras. You know, there is a sufficient supply of non-invasive equipment to take thermal temperatures. You're based on the criteria that we outlined last week, you're going to have to engage every customer anyway and ask them the questions. So you have that opportunity. Your employees are going to be face-to-face at some checkpoint, and that's the opportunity to take the temperature. I'm sensitive to the fact that equipment procurement could be an obstacle, and I have conveyed that. I've conveyed that to the RLC. I've conveyed it to the governor's staff. But my sense is, if I were giving you advice, and I'm not here to give you advice, but I'm here to help you understand what the landscape may look like, I would probably be planning for customer temperature checks.
Excuse me, Mr. Jones.
Yes.
This is Kathy Trahan. I'm president and CEO of Alliance Safety Council, and we take care of all the contractors entering all the facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, the options that they're doing, I heard you talk about a 10-minute wait and a 15-minute wait. But what we found we process hundreds, not thousands of people a day, but we do two different types. We do one type of thermal check, but we don't use the same equipment. If there's a question about their temperature, we move to either an oral thermometer with a safety plastic wrap on it, because generally they don't get as upset if you're using a different device and you get the same result. It's usually they question if you use the same device twice. In addition to that, we do have a gate check application that allows you to target the questions and verify that each question has been asked for compliance, and then to put their temperature on there. So a lot of the large facilities like the paper mills and folks like that use it. So it's just another option to use digital technology to track and trace and maintain compliance and the ability to answer an audit.
Thank you, Ms. Trahan. And I should have said this at the outset, but we welcome public comment, but we're going to take those comments at the end, just for the purposes of continuity of our meeting. We're just going to permit those people on the task force to comment during the course of the meeting. but I will open it up for comments like Ms. Trahan's as we get to the end. If you'll just help us with
Understood.
that, thank you. If you just help us with that, we'll give everybody the opportunity to weigh in. So that would be my advice that you can share with your operators, is to perhaps prepare for that. And I think it's just knowing what I know about those who are giving public health counsel to the governor. I suspect that they're going to say that this has got to be a requirement. So that's kind of where that issue is. Kind of as a transition from that to the larger issue of personal protective equipment acquisition issues, I'll turn it back over to Dan to kind of lead a discussion on what challenges you guys are having there.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I definitely want to work with everybody and not necessarily be the centerpiece, but although we're competitors, we're all in this together. And I've heard some groups have had struggles getting all the PPE they need, whether it be the thermometers or it's sanitizer at the bulk level that they need to get the bulk level, or the masks in general. And all I wanted to do was simply open it up to all of you today and see if anybody's struggling, because we will be able to work together to get this figured out. So if anybody has any issues, now is the time. If you're a member of the task force, raise your hand, let us know, or if you're doing okay, or if you have an abundance, that's great. But I didn't want to miss an opportunity as we approach the day, whatever that day may be, where somebody may not be able to open because they simply didn't have the PPE. So with that, I'll turn it over to anyone who has comments or questions on that topic.
If I may offer up the association's services on this point to act as kind of a data center for vendors that are capable of supplying in quantities needed. We can certainly accumulate that information and push it out to anyone who requests it that's part of this industry. We have sourcing for hand sanitizer, some masks and things like that already. So we can assist in that role if it'd be useful. If you prefer to chase your own, then that's obviously fine too.
No, that's great, Wade. Thank you.
Stan?
Yeah, no, we visited on that with industry yesterday, and I think everybody's chasing their own. I think with a lot of the retail vendors that we're already doing business with, a lot of that stuff is starting to become available. So I think while it's challenging, I think everybody's okay, with the exception of thermometers right now seem to be the longest lead item, but we're working through that.
Thanks, Stan. Is anybody really struggling to the point they want to point it out now?
This is Vincent Schwartz. I think we've sourced everything and have delivery dates, and hopefully all of those dates are met. But I think that we've sourced most of the PPE, mask, gloves, and sanitizer for our properties generally, and I think we've got thermometer sources as well. Just sort of the simple version at the moment.
Thanks, Vincent. Mr. Chairman, if nobody else has a comment, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, I think the masks are probably easier to find today than they were 2-3 weeks ago. I would think that you should make, even though they're not required on the gaming floor, we talked about recommending to customers that they wear masks. And I think that you should have some mask available. If someone comes to the property and they don't have a mask, you can make one available to them. I just think that's looking out after your customers. And I think it's just good for your business model. So keep that in mind when you're trying to source this material and have it available. You're going to have to do it for your employees. And I think everyone's made that plan, and they understand that that's just a requirement. That's just going to be one of the rules of the game. So our recommendation, as you recall, was to permit properties to open at 50% of authorized capacity. What I'm hearing in terms of feedback is the initial phases, reopening commercial businesses in Louisiana, may well be at 25%. the dialogue that I've had with some of the RLC members has I've tried to make the case that a casino isn't a restaurant. The state does not mandate if a restaurant is going to open that they have, you know, a certain number of busboys or a certain number of dishwashers or a certain number of waiters or waitresses. With respect to gaming, there are mandates. If you're a casino, if you're a video truck stop, you have got to provide surveillance, security, with a much more enhanced and aggressive cleaning protocols that we're going to call for, that you agreed to in your plan that you'll file with state police. You're probably going to have more people on the floor than you did in the past. So I do not know that everyone will be able to open at 25%. They may look at the business model and go, you know, the overhead just is far outstrips what we may return in revenue, and we're just going to have to wait until 50% or more. So I don't know that that's going to be the case, but I would like to I'd like to open it up. Wade, what do you see there?
We have had that discussion with some of the larger operators. I think there's also some guidance perhaps from AGA that a 35% threshold at the national level was being considered as a recommendation from the industry. You're right. There is a point at which it does not make sense. You lose less money by remaining closed. So it's also impacted by what other conditions and what the customer's tolerance will be for venturing out just in general. So it's a bit unknown. Obviously, we would prefer the flexibility of 50%. We do not anticipate a flood of patrons on day 1 or day 10, or even regrettably, probably day 30. So it may be moot anyway, because even at 35 or 50, I doubt we're going to fill it. So, you know, there is just that point that, you know, for some operators, it will make more sense to remain closed.
Let's just kind of go around the room. Barry, I don't want to put you on the spot, but are you on, Vincent? You sound like you're talking.
No, I'm on.
Okay.
You were talking to Barry when I.
Yeah. Okay. There's a little feedback. Use your microphones. Barry, could you make it work at 25%, Margaritaville?
We ran the numbers and we're in the red at 25%, as are some of the other people in our market that we talked to. And Mr. Chairman, you hit it right on the head as far as the mandated positions and the additional staffing and the people on board that we'll have to cover, and the amount of people that'll come in and probably gravitate to the lower denom machines. And it's really hard to make a business case for it. But I think the other thing we have to look at is, you know, we're regional attractions. We have hundreds of thousands of people in the database. If the people do come, and they probably will come on a Saturday, the best place that we can put people to ensure social distancing is in the casino. That's our largest square footage. So if people are coming, the congestion that we would be dealing with outside of the casino may be a bigger social distancing problem than if we had a higher capacity to allow people in. And I think Wade's right. If we get to maybe a third, now we're looking at a model that's more profitable for us to operate. And I think we're also able to handle people without creating unintended consequences of lines and congestion outside of the casino.
Okay. Vincent, did you want to add anything from board standpoint?
I would agree with Barry in the sense that you know, if we don't get closer, or with Wade, you know, above the 30% range, that is kind of the space where it might be less expensive to remain closed. Each vessel is a little bit different. You know, the first generation riverboats, Their capacity is typically lower than the newer versions for the land facilities. Just, I guess, from a Coast Guard standpoint and facility and just old rules, their capacities are somewhat smaller. So the 25% of the first generation is probably much more painful than the second generation and even some of the land-based facilities. So that does create some challenges. I did receive something from one of the chambers in Louisiana, and they were floating at 35% in their area, and they referenced an AGA website, and had some challenges locating that recommendation anywhere. But that certainly would feel a little bit better than 25%.
Thank you. Baron?
Thank you.
Yeah, we've ran the numbers, and it gets into the red when we get below that 50%. Increase staffing to enforce social distancing policies as we bring in more security staffing, more cleaning staffing, that bites into that number. So when it gets below 50%, that profitability is borderline.
Dan, I don't want to leave you out of this conversation.
No, we've had the conversation, preliminarily, Mr. Chairman, and as I've heard from my colleagues, I share their sentiment. We've run the numbers as well. Probably be okay at the land-based. We'll be struggling with our riverboat and with our racetrack. We want to make sure that we give them the best chance for success. But at 25%, it would be very difficult.
Okay. How about video poker? Stan?
Yeah, again, not to sound like a broken record, but our occupancy issue is slightly different from the other business models from big casinos. So the consensus is that a 25% occupancy would not be a problem in terms of reopening.
Okay.
Obviously, the more the better, but we could definitely make 25% occupancy work, with the understanding that the device count is a social distancing issue, separate and apart from the occupancy number. And so, yeah, the consensus is we can make that work if needed be.
Good. Arthur?
I agree with Stan. We spoke about it with the industry, and I think at the 25%, we could probably make it work as long as we have the social distancing, meet those guidelines with the machines, and they're not limited to that number. I think if it's separate, we shouldn't have that problem. We're much smaller facilities.
Okay. Trey, did you come on? Are you there? Okay, we're missing him today. Michael Lejeune, there are a number of people on the charitable gaming side who've raised some issues. I'm going to ask if they reach out directly to you after the meeting's over with, but I suspect this is going to have an impact on those operations as well.
And I'll ditto everybody else. I mean, 25% would probably make them a struggle, but they could definitely rearrange their payout to hopefully adjust that. But 25% would definitely be a struggle for them. But I appreciate that, Chairman. I'll definitely have them reach out to me after the meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is Trey Santillo here.
Hey, Trey.
I'm sorry, I was muted.
That's okay.
Yeah, just on behalf of the charitable bingo, yeah, I much like the video poker, which I also have interest in. I think we can make that work. Those floors are pretty similar as far as square footage and capacity. So I feel that the 25% works for us.
Yeah, good. I have attempted to convey, I knew what those concerns were, but I wanted to get them on the record so that when the RLC here's our recommendation, because our recommendation was at 50%, that they understand that if they or the governor decide to go more conservatively, there may be some operators who just simply can't make the numbers work. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And the other reality is, if that's the only way that gaming can resume, that's what we'll have to operate on. None of these conditions are going to be forever, I hope. I think we're in a transition phase in reopening, and I'm hopeful that in tracking the numbers, that they continue to do the metrics every day, that they continue to flatten, and there's more testing that will be rolled out for the state. The governor got that commitment from the president. So yeah, I understand it's going to be painful for some people. We acknowledge that. But whatever the final recommendation of the RLC and the determination by the governor is, that's what we're going to have to live with for at least the next few weeks, perhaps a few months. I don't know. We can't predict that. But I think the consensus is give us the opportunity to open, and we'll see if we can start, bringing employees back, getting them off the unemployment rolls, and start contributing back to the state revenue stream, and get your companies, from being in the negative column because you don't have any cash running through your business. So I think that's part of the goal of what the RLC is trying to achieve, at least the short-term crisis goal. If you have not begun to do so, I would strongly encourage that you pass along to your constituents, those, those operators who are part of your organization, Wade, the operators who are licensed casinos in the state. If they haven't already begun the process of putting their reopening plan together for review to state police, they should be entering the final stage of that. They at least have a framework for what they need to address. Now, nothing says the governor couldn't come out in a week, 2 weeks, and add a restriction. Would have to amend those things if one had been approved already. But I think everyone would be wise to do that, because when the governor decides that he's going to announce reopening, theoretically, you might not have more than a week or 2 weeks to get your plan finalized, submitted to state police, and Major McNeil and his folks will have to review that and make certain that that the plan hits on each of the elements in a detailed way, so that state police will have a level of comfortability that you're going to operate based on the conditions and the restrictions that this task force recommended last week. Major, did you want to say anything? Is your microphone on?
Can you hear me?
Now I can, yes, sir.
Okay.
No, I can't. We lost you.
Okay, now it works.
Yes.
I don't know what's
Okay.
going on. But anyways, so in the final stages, I'll have something out probably next week for industry on both sides of a quasi checklist to go by of what we'll be looking for, with the understanding that, it's got something to go by and that things may change depending on the governor's recommendations, and kind of give you all an idea of where we're going. I'm having the field lieutenants go over it right now to make sure I'm not missing anything for video poker or the casino side. But we should be having that wrapped up by either Friday or Monday morning to y'all.
Thank you. We have pretty well worked through the key points on our agenda anyway. Before I open it up for some public comment, I want to tell you where we're going in the next few weeks. Next week, we hope to have representatives from the Spectrum Group Gaming join us on our teleconference. It was Spectrum that prepared a very comprehensive look at gaming in Louisiana. They submitted it to Economic Development last year, just before the legislative session started. And none of the legislators really had an opportunity to review the material that was in there. In terms of the long-term goals of the RLC, they're going to be looking for us to provide recommendations to them on what we think the industry should look like moving forward, what policy changes could be recommended either at the executive level or the legislative level to permit this industry to grow and prosper and contribute, employ more people. It's really supposed to be about economic development. How do we get there? So I think before we get into those weeds, which will come in the weeks after next week, we'll have Spectrum come on and sort of lay out what they saw. They came out and objectively looked at where we are in Louisiana, what our competitive disadvantages are compared to other states, and they made some pretty solid recommendations. So we've extended an invitation to them. I fully expect them to agree to be with us next week, and I think that provides a good starting point for us to start talking about you know, what's needed on the casino side in Louisiana, what's needed on the video poker side in Louisiana. Are there any policy changes that need to be made with respect to charitable gaming? And perhaps we'll have a better idea after we hear from Spectrum next week. Are there any questions at this point from any of my task force members?
Chairman,
Any issues?
I have
Yes.
to go back. For Major McNeil, the question back to the screening. Will operators, video poker operators, if they choose to, allow security to assist in the screening process in the video poker truck stops?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, they can be used.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks,
Yes, sir.
Stan. We have some time left. If there's anyone who's joined us who we've seen your comments in the chat section, but if anyone wants to contribute briefly before we adjourn the meeting, I'll be happy to permit you to weigh in.
Chairman Jones.
Yes.
Michael Lejean. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I had some operators that had gone online with the Office of the Fire Marshal,
Yes.
and they saw on there that was open safely. So they clicked on it and they were given and I'm going to read it, registration with the Office of State Fire Marshal for phase opening. And they considered that their approval to open. And I assured them it definitely was not, that they still have to go by our guidelines or the guidelines of this, of the governor. And so I just wanted to make that note to the board, to this task force, to let them know that their state fire marshal is giving registration clearance for, and the service type is casino, racetrack, video poker, gaming areas. So it's not an official approval, and they took it as that. I just wanted to assure you that I've instructed them that it is not.
Thank you. I saw my friend and fire marshal on TV 2 nights ago, and I understand exactly what Butch is attempting to do is become sort of a centralized place where people can go for information and register to open businesses. But I will have a conversation with him. Anyone who's licensed to operate a gaming facility in Louisiana is responsible to the board, through state police, and to the Department of Revenue if you're charitable gaming, and that's where the approval will have to come from. There is some guidance on there that I think, there's a natural overlap. The gaming board regulates casinos. I don't regulate the restaurants, and I don't regulate the hotels. Those are sometimes part of a gaming property. I don't regulate how diesel is pumped at truck stops. But there are other task force groups that are addressing issues that may be relevant to the groups that you represent. And keep that in mind, so that if a casino sees fit to, once the property opens up for gaming and they want to open up their 3 restaurants, they're still going to have to comply with all the state and local health requirements that have been put in place with respect to social distancing and capacity. That's not something that we can set for all those amenity services. So your people just need to be aware of that. We're not, I'm glad we're not the one-stop shop for everything casino related. So there are other groups out there setting those guidelines and restrictions. So just make sure that we try and coordinate that when you get to the point of reopening. Is there anyone out there who wants to briefly weigh in with a comment?
Mr. Chairman, this is Major McNeil. I got one comment related to that comment also that you just made. That also goes for the restaurants and bars related to their 3 machines. Because we've already started receiving phone calls that once they open, they think they can immediately open up with their machines. And I know we've not discussed as a task force where we stand and how that's going to be done itself. So that's another matter that they need to understand also.
Based on my appreciation of the federal plan, bars are not included in phase 1. So that would be type 1 licenses, I believe. And I do not know whether, the governor will work around that, or if he's going to explicitly follow the federal guidelines. And if he does, bars would not be included. So those 3 machine operators would not, first of all, they wouldn't be able to open their bars. So until they open their bars, they certainly can't resume video poker play.
And how would that relate to restaurants, Jim? Same question, restaurants, they have 3 machines in there. If the restaurant's open, is safe to assume the machines can or cannot operate?
I'm sorry, Stan, I didn't understand you.
Okay, same scenario, but with the restaurants that have 3 machines in them. If the restaurants are allowed to open, should they assume the games will not be turned on or will be turned on?
My assumption would be that if a restaurant is permitted to open under the state guidelines, then their video poker devices could be enabled. That would be my opinion. All right. Now, I haven't talked to any attorneys on that or staff, but that would just be my gut opinion. If the facility can otherwise open under state guidelines, I think the gaming would be permitted. They have to go through the same process. They have to apply for reopening and address all the issues of either panels or social distancing. But that would be my opinion.
Good catch. Thank
you. Okay, this is Dorian Nunez here, Omni Research. I'm in New Orleans, Louisiana, as Nunez like the college. So for those of you who need to spell it, we're an independent research and financial analysis firm and a customer of yours who looks forward to maybe coming back one day. I'm going to be brief, but I want to tell you this. 3 letters, MIT, M, money. Go get our money. Lobbyists are in Washington, D.C. now negotiating for how to get their share of that $2 trillion. There's money up there, and our state representatives need to go get our money. Nevada's getting money for their gaming people, and I assure you that Churchill Downs with the Kentucky Derby is getting money for them, and we need to not take it on the chin and sit back here and be passive. We need to be as aggressive as Nungasser was during Katrina. Go get our money. What's the sense of having a state treasurer as your senator if he can't sit down with the secretary of the treasury and figure out how to get us part of that billions of dollars? So that's the M part. I, inclusion. We need to be inclusive. The gaming industry has had a poor track record in the past of being inclusive of women and minority suppliers. In New Jersey, they signed agreements with the NAACP. Now, I don't know what the situation is today, so I may be dated, but I hope that as we open up in a state that's 32% African American, with Jefferson Parish that's 25% Hispanic, with 50% women, and that some women businesses and minority businesses are included in your supplier chain. Even though you didn't get PPP money, you can help your suppliers. And if you keep your suppliers in business, then you'll be in business. So that's just good standard LSU MBA Business 101 stuff. You need to be innovative. There's money available for us. The airline industry is getting $25 billion. We need to get our fair share. And it won't happen if we don't speak up, organize, and have some new players on the team. Like Joe Burrows came in at LSU and then we won his championship. You got to get new players, fresh blood, fresh ideas, or you'll end up right back where you are. This is a new enemy that no one has ever encountered. I had a 5-star brigadier general, and I'm getting ready to finish. I had a 5-star brigadier general say, I'd rather be in Iran and Afghanistan because I could see the enemy and I had equipment. You can't see this enemy and we don't have the equipment. Lastly, you got to test. Now, there's somebody in the chat room, a woman-owned firm, says she's got something to help test. There's another company called Kinsa, Kinsa, that has volunteered to donate thermometers to help with testing as an early warning system. They were in the healthcare task force a few days ago. Kinsa. You can Google it. I don't need to, but there's grant money available to help pay for testing equipment. Unite. I consult to unions. Unite wants safety, worker safety. So you need to get with them and come up with a joint plan for securing the resources. Secure the resources to do the testing. It shouldn't all come out of your pocket. Finally, you need to assume that nobody's showing up till Christmas. So how are you going to survive? Go get the money to bridge, to get things back to a, quote, normal there. If page 1 isn't go get the money in your summary report, And it
Please
pays-
wrap up, Mr. Nunez.
I'm
Please wrap
finishing.
up.
I'm finishing respectfully.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We
I'm
appreciate it.
finishing. I'm finishing.
We need to move on to the next comment. We need to permit others to comment.
Usually they give you 10 seconds. So I'm happy to finish in 10 seconds. And number two, to our West Point graduate who's the governor, see the hill, take the hill. Go to Capitol Hill and get our money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nunez. We appreciate it. Thank you very.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else who wishes to comment before we entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Chairman Jones?
Yes.
This is Kathy Trahan again from Alliance Safety Council. I posted our contact information. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit, and for many industries, we have been developing free training to make sure that the workers that are going back to work are educated on the hazards and how to mitigate those hazards. So if there's anything that we can do to help your industry, we can develop it and deliver it at no charge.
Thank you very much, Ms. Trahan. We appreciate you offering the services and your contact information so that they can reach out to you. Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Chairman Stan Guidros, for clarification purposes, path forward in terms of approval process at this point, or are we just going to anticipate the governor's public comments on Monday to see where we go from here?
I'm sure he's going to address phase one on Monday. The question that we cannot answer right now is whether or not he will include casinos in phase one. If I were an operator, I would rush to get everything done just in case. So that would be my advice. I mean, and you know, if it's not in phase one, if it comes as 1.5 or into phase two, they've already got that preliminary work. You know, the work's already done, so they haven't wasted their time.
Thank you.
If there are no other comments, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn in a second.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Wade motioned, moved, and I think it may have been seconded by Barry. That's who we'll attribute it to anyway. Any objection? Without objection, this teleconference and task force will stand adjourned. Thank you for joining us. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.